Maya Chen pressed her face against the cold metal bars of her cage, watching the alien landscape rush past through the transport ship's windows. The purple sky and twin suns meant she was impossibly far from Earth, farther than any 13-year-old should ever be. Her captors, the Vextari, had stolen her 3 months ago from her family's camping trip in Colorado. She still remembered her parents' screams as the silver ship descended from the clouds. The Vextari were tall, thin creatures with gray skin and black eyes that never seemed to blink. They moved like spiders, all joints and sharp angles. Maya had learned their language quickly during her imprisonment, a skill that surprised even her captors. Humans, they said, were supposed to be stupid. They called her species primitive mammals and barely evolved apes. But Maya was far from stupid. She had been reading college-level books since age 10, could solve complex math problems in her head, and spoke 4 languages fluently. Her parents had always called her their little genius, though she never felt particularly special. Now, listening to the Vextari discuss their plans, she wished she had paid less attention to their words. "The dragon of Kepler 442b grows hungry," rasped Commander Zexmore, his voice like grinding metal. "The tribute must be perfect. Young, intelligent, full of life force." Maya's blood turned to ice. She had heard whispers of this dragon throughout her captivity. The Vextari Empire controlled dozens of star systems, but they lived in constant fear of one creature, an ancient being that demanded regular sacrifices in exchange for allowing them to mine the precious quantum crystals on his world. The crystals powered their entire civilization. "This human female shows unusual neural activity," another Vextari observed, studying a glowing tablet. "Her brain patterns are unlike anything in our databases. Perhaps the dragon will find her satisfactory." The ship shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace. Through the window, Maya saw a massive planet covered in twisted black mountains and flowing rivers of lava. The air itself seemed to shimmer with heat and energy. This was Kepler 442b, the dragon's domain. As they descended, Maya caught her first glimpse of the creature they had traveled so far to appease. He was enormous, easily the size of a football stadium, with scales that shifted between deep emerald and midnight black. His eyes burned like stars, and when he moved, the very ground trembled. Ancient and terrible, he perched atop a mountain of crystal formations that pulsed with inner light. The Vextari ship landed in a clearing surrounded by the bones of previous offerings. Thousands of skeletons from dozens of different species created a grim monument to the dragon's appetite. Maya's escorts dragged her from the cage, their claws digging into her arms as they forced her toward a stone platform at the base of the mountain. "Great Thaisara," Commander Zexmore called out, his voice trembling despite his attempt at authority. "We bring you tribute as our ancestors agreed. This young human possesses rare intelligence and strong life force. We hope she pleases you." The dragon's massive head turned toward them, and Maya felt the weight of his ancient gaze. When he spoke, his voice was like distant thunder, felt as much as heard. Another frightened child. How tiresome. The Vextari grow lazy in their selections. "But Lord Thaisara," Zexmore protested. "This one is different. Her neural patterns show—" "Silence." The word hit like a physical blow, sending the Vextari stumbling backward. "Leave the offering and depart. I will determine her worth myself." The aliens needed no further encouragement. They fled to their ship as if their lives depended on it, which they probably did. Within minutes, Maya heard the roar of engines as they escaped into space, leaving her alone with the most dangerous predator in the galaxy. Maya stood perfectly still on the platform, her heart pounding so hard she was sure the dragon could hear it. Everything she had ever read about facing dangerous animals told her not to run. Running triggered the chase instinct. Instead, she looked up at the massive creature and did something that surprised them both. She spoke in perfect Draconic, the ancient language she had learned from intercepted communications during her captivity. "I greet you, Ancient One. I am Maya Chen of Earth. I know why I am here." Thaisara's burning eyes widened slightly. In all his millennia of existence, no offering had ever addressed him in the old tongue. Most couldn't even speak, paralyzed by terror or already dead from fear. This small human child stood before him with dignity, showing respect without groveling. "You speak the ancient words," he rumbled, lowering his great head to study her more closely. "How does an infant species like humanity know the language of the first ones?" Maya lifted her chin, meeting his gaze despite every instinct screaming at her to run. "Humans are young, but we learn quickly. We adapt, we remember. Your language appears in fragments throughout Vexistari databases. I pieced it together during my imprisonment. The dragon was silent for a long moment, considering. No creature had impressed him in over 1,000 years. The Vexitari brought him mindless beasts or terror-frozen primitives. This human child showed intelligence, courage, and, most surprisingly, respect for proper protocol. "Tell me, small one," Tessara said finally. "What do you know of the bargain between your captors and myself?" Maya straightened her shoulders. "I know they mine your crystals in exchange for regular tributes. I know they fear you more than death itself, and I know that you're not really a monster, despite what they believe." This last statement made the ancient dragon pause. "What makes you think such a thing?" "Because," Maya said quietly, "if you were truly evil, you would have eaten me the moment they left. Instead, you're talking to me. Even dragons, it seems, can be lonely." Tessara stared at the small human for what felt like an eternity. No one had called him lonely in 3,000 years. No one had dared suggest that his fearsome reputation might be anything other than the absolute truth. Yet this child, this insignificant offering from a species barely out of its technological infancy, had seen through millennia of carefully constructed terror. "You are either very brave or very foolish," the dragon said finally, steam rising from his nostrils. "Perhaps both," Maya managed a small smile despite her terror. "My parents always said I was too smart for my own good. I guess they were right." The mention of her parents brought a wave of sadness that she couldn't hide. Tessara noticed immediately. Despite his fearsome appearance, he had always been sensitive to emotional pain. It was part of what made the regular tribute so difficult to bear. "You miss your family," he observed, settling his massive form into a more comfortable position. The ground shook with each movement, but Maya stood her ground. "Every day," she admitted. "They probably think I'm dead. The Vexitari took me while we were camping. One moment I was roasting marshmallows with my mom and dad. The next I was in a cage on an alien ship." Tessara's ancient mind processed this information. The Vexitari had always been cruel, but stealing children from their families seemed particularly vicious even for them. Over the centuries, he had assumed most of his offerings were willing sacrifices or condemned criminals. The thought that they were kidnapping innocents from their homes made his anger burn hotter than the planet's core. "Tell me about your world," he said, settling down completely so his great head was closer to Maya's level. "Tell me about Earth." For the next several hours, Maya painted pictures with her words. She described blue skies and white clouds, oceans that sparkled in sunlight, and forests that changed color with the seasons. She told him about snow and rain, about animals that roamed free without fear, and about humans who had learned to fly among the stars despite their lack of wings. Tessara listened with growing fascination. His own world had been beautiful once, before the Great War that had scorched its surface and driven him into isolation. Hearing about Earth awakened memories of what his planet had been like in the ancient days, when other dragons soared through crystal-clear skies and life flourished in every corner. "Your species builds things," he noted when Maya described human cities and technology. "The Vexitari claim humans are primitive, but you speak of achievements that rival their own." Maya nodded eagerly. "We've only had advanced technology for about 200 years, but we've accomplished amazing things. We've walked on our moon, sent robots to other planets, and started reaching for the stars. My generation might be the first to establish permanent colonies beyond Earth." "Might be," Tessara repeated sadly. "But not if the Vexitari continue their raids." This statement confused Maya. "What do you mean?" The ancient dragon shifted uncomfortably, causing small avalanches of crystal to tumble down the mountainside. "Child, you are not the first human I have seen. The Vexitari have been raiding your world for almost 50 years. They take your people for slaves, for experiments, and for—" He gestured with one massive claw toward the bone-filled clearing. Maya felt the blood drain from her face. "How many?" "Thousands," Tessara admitted. "Perhaps tens of thousands. Your governments don't even know it's happening. The Vexitari are careful to take only those who won't be missed immediately, or whose disappearances can be explained away." The weight of this revelation hit Maya like a physical blow. All those missing person cases, all those unexplained disappearances that made the news briefly before being forgotten. How many of them had been alien abductions? How many families were mourning loved ones who had been dragged across the galaxy to feed this dragon's hunger? "Why do you allow it?" she asked, anger finally overriding her fear. You're obviously powerful enough to stop them. Why do you let them do this? Thisara's great eyes dimmed with shame. Because I'm a coward, he said simply. 3,000 years ago I made a bargain that I thought would protect what remained of my world. The Vextari could mine my crystals in exchange for regular offerings to sustain my life force. I thought they would bring me criminals or volunteers, not innocents stolen from their homes. But you kept accepting the offerings anyway, Maya pressed, her 13-year-old sense of justice burning bright. Yes, he admitted. By the time I realized the truth, I was trapped by my own reputation. The Vextari believe I am a monster who devours any who displease me. If I showed mercy or tried to change our agreement, they would see it as weakness. They would bring armies to claim my crystals by force, and in the resulting war my world would be destroyed completely. Maya stared at him in amazement. So you've been pretending to be evil for thousands of years to protect your planet? And in doing so I have become the very monster I pretended to be, Thisara said miserably. I have accepted the deaths of innocents to prevent a greater catastrophe. The math seemed simple, but the guilt grows heavier with each passing century. For the first time since meeting the dragon, Maya felt something other than fear. She felt pity for this ancient being, trapped by his own good intentions and forced to live with the consequences of an impossible choice. It reminded her of a story her father used to tell, about a man who had to choose between saving one life or saving many. What if there was another way? She asked quietly. Thisara lifted his massive head. What do you mean? Maya's mind was racing, processing everything she had learned about the Vextari during her captivity. I mean, what if we could change the rules of your bargain without the Vextari realizing what was happening? What if we could make them think you were getting more dangerous, not less? The dragon's eyes began to glow brighter. Continue. The Vextari are bullies, Maya explained, pacing back and forth on the platform as her excitement grew. I've watched them for months. They're cruel to those they think are weak, but they're terrified of anything that might actually fight back. What if instead of eating your offerings, you started collecting them? What if you began building an army? Thisara's burning eyes widened as Maya's words sank in. In all his millennia of existence, he had never considered such a possibility. The idea was so audacious, so completely contrary to everything the Vextari believed about him, that it might actually work. An army of offerings, he mused, his massive voice rumbling with something that might have been hope. But child, most who are brought here are already near death from terror or injury. Those who survive are broken in spirit. Maya shook her head vigorously. That's because they don't understand what's happening to them. But if someone explained, if they knew they weren't going to die but instead were being recruited to fight back against their captors. She gestured around at the bone-filled clearing. Are all of these real? The dragon looked almost embarrassed. No. Most are replications I created to maintain the illusion. The few real ones are from those who died of fear before I could calm them, or who were already mortally wounded when they arrived. I do not actually consume sentient beings. So you've been staging your own horror show for thousands of years? Maya said with something approaching admiration. That's actually brilliant. But we could make it better. Instead of pretending to eat people, what if you pretended to be transforming them into something more dangerous? Thisara tilted his great head, intrigued. How so? Maya's mind was working faster than it ever had before, pulling together everything she knew about alien psychology, military strategy, and basic human nature. The Vextari are terrified of anything they can't control. What would scare them more than a dragon who eats his offerings? A dragon who turns his offerings into dragons themselves. The ancient being was quiet for a long moment, processing this concept. Then to Maya's amazement, he began to laugh. The sound was like distant thunder mixed with the rumble of a landslide, and it shook the entire mountain. Crystals chimed like bells as the vibrations passed through them. You want me to pretend I'm creating an army of dragons? He said when he could speak again. The Vextari would be absolutely terrified. More than terrified, Maya agreed. They'd probably double or triple their offerings to keep you happy. And meanwhile, we'd actually be building a real army of survivors who want revenge against the people who stole them from their homes. Thisara considered this carefully. There are problems with your plan, young strategist. First, how do we hide an army of living beings? The Vextari do occasionally scan my world to ensure I'm not developing technology that could threaten them. Maya had already thought of this. Easy, you're magic, aren't you? Or at least you have abilities that look like magic to most species. You create illusions. You manipulate matter at the molecular level to make fake bones. You probably have some kind of shape-shifting abilities. I am what your people might call a psychic entity, Thaisara confirmed. My consciousness exists partially in dimensions the Vextari cannot detect or understand. I can indeed create illusions and manipulate matter in ways that appear supernatural. Perfect, Maya said, grinning for the first time in months. So when the Vextari bring new offerings, we stage a big show. Lots of roaring, maybe some fake mystical energy, and then the new arrival disappears into your hidden base. Meanwhile, their instruments detect what looks like a new draconic life signature. But it's actually just you extending part of your psychic presence to make it seem like there's another dragon. The more Thaisara thought about it, the more brilliant the plan seemed. He could create an entire underground city within his mountain, hidden from all conventional scans. The survivors could live there, train there, and eventually emerge when they were ready to take the fight to their former captors. There is still the matter of actually fighting the Vextari Empire, he pointed out. They control dozens of worlds and have billions of soldiers. Even with my help, a few hundred rescued beings would hardly pose a threat. Maya's smile became predatory, and for a moment she looked far older than her 13 years. You're thinking like someone from this galaxy. The Vextari are used to fighting primitive species with simple weapons and limited coordination, but humans have something they've never encountered before, which is, we're really, really good at war, Maya said simply. It's kind of embarrassing, actually. We've been fighting each other for thousands of years, and we've gotten extremely creative about it. Give us their technology, show us their weaknesses, and let us organize the other survivors. The Vextari won't know what hit them. Thaisara studied the small human with growing respect. She was right about her species' reputation for military innovation. Even with their primitive technology, humans had developed strategies and tactics that impressed even the ancient dragon. Combined with Vextari equipment and his own abilities, they might actually have a chance. Very well, he said formally. Maya Chen of Earth, I accept your proposal. We will build this army together. But first we must stage your transformation for the Vextari sensors that I know are watching us even now. Maya felt a thrill of excitement mixed with terror. What do I need to do? Trust me, Thaisara said, rising to his full imposing height. And try not to scream too convincingly. We need them to believe you're being changed, not killed. The dragon reared back, his massive form silhouetted against the alien sky. Energy began to crackle around his body and his roar shook the entire planet. Maya found herself surrounded by swirling lights and the sensation of falling through space and time itself. To any watching Vextari sensors, it would look like the human girl was being consumed by mystical dragon fire. In reality, Thaisara was using his psychic abilities to teleport her to a hidden chamber deep within his mountain, a place that would become the first room of their secret base. When the lights faded, Maya found herself in a beautiful crystalline cavern lit by soft natural luminescence. The air was warm and breathable, and she could hear the distant sound of flowing water. Welcome, Thaisara's voice echoed from the walls themselves, to the sanctuary of the lost. You, Maya Chen, are officially the first recruit in our army of liberation. Maya looked around the amazing space that would become her new home and training ground. For the first time since her capture, she felt hope. The Vextari had made a fatal mistake when they had thrown her to the dragon. They had given their greatest enemy the one thing he needed most, a human's perspective on warfare. When do we start? She asked. 6 months later, the sanctuary had transformed from a single crystal chamber into a sprawling underground city. Maya stood in the central command center, watching holographic displays that showed the locations of 17 different dragons across the mountain complex. Each display represented another rescued being who had supposedly been transformed by Thaisara's power. The newest arrival was a Cathari warrior named Vexilin, whose blue-scaled species had been fighting the Vextari Empire for centuries before finally being conquered. She had been captured during the last battle for her homeworld and was expected to provide particularly satisfying entertainment for the ancient dragon. Instead, she now served as Maya's lieutenant and chief military instructor. The human understands warfare better than beings who have fought for 3 times her lifespan, Vexilin reported to Thaisara during their daily briefing. Her strategies are unlike anything in our databases. Unconventional, unpredictable, and devastatingly effective. Maya blushed at the praise, but she couldn't deny the results. Using lessons learned from human military history, She had organized their small group into highly efficient cells. Each cell specialized in different aspects of warfare: intelligence gathering, sabotage, technological adaptation, and psychological operations. The Psychological Warfare Division had been particularly successful. Led by a telepathic Mindari named Zeftos, they had been planting subtle suggestions in the minds of Vextari personnel during supply runs. The aliens were beginning to report strange dreams about dragons multiplying in the darkness, about ancient evils awakening across the galaxy. The beauty of fighting the Vextari, Maya explained to a group of new recruits, is that they've made so many enemies. Every species they've conquered wants revenge. We just have to give them hope and coordination. The latest intelligence report supported this theory. Across 12 different star systems, previously defeated species were showing signs of renewed resistance. The Vexitari attributed this to random uprisings, but Maya knew better. Word was spreading through slave networks and prison camps that something was changing, that the dragon of Kepler 442b was creating an army of liberation. Thyssera materialized in the command center, his massive form somehow fitting comfortably in the space despite being physically impossible. His psychic abilities allowed him to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, appearing wherever he was needed within the mountain. The Vextari are growing suspicious, he reported. They've begun sending larger tribute ships and conducting more detailed scans of my world. Commander Zexmore has requested permission from the High Command to station a permanent monitoring station in orbit. Maya nodded grimly. They had always known this day would come. How long do we have? Perhaps 3 months before they arrive in force, Thyssera estimated. Certainly no more than 6. Then it's time for Phase 2, Maya announced, activating the main communication system that connected to resistance cells across the galaxy. Attention all units. Operation Prometheus is now active. Over the past months, Maya and her team had been carefully placing their people throughout the Vextari Empire. Some had been killed by the dragon and their deaths faked, allowing them to operate as presumed dead ghosts. Others had been officially transformed, and then secretly transported to key positions where they could gather intelligence and prepare for coordinated strikes. The plan was ambitious beyond anything ever attempted against the Vextari. Instead of a single massive assault that could be contained and defeated, they would strike simultaneously at dozens of targets across multiple star systems. Supply lines would be severed, communication networks disrupted, and key installations destroyed all at the same moment. Vexilin, status report on our fleet preparations, Maya ordered. The Kethari warrior gestured to a holographic display showing the hidden shipyard Thyssera had carved from solid rock deep beneath his mountain. 47 vessels ready for combat, all equipped with hybrid technology combining Vexitari systems with improvements developed by our engineering teams. The human suggestions for tactical modifications have proven particularly effective. Maya smiled with satisfaction. One advantage humans had over most galactic species was their talent for taking existing technology and improving it in unexpected ways. Vextari ships were fast and heavily armed, but they had been designed to fight conventional enemies. Maya's modifications turned them into something entirely new. Vessels optimized for the kind of three-dimensional thinking that had made human pilots legendary throughout their own system. Zeftos, how's our propaganda campaign progressing? Maya asked the telepathic Mindari. Beyond our most optimistic projections, Zeftos replied, his mental voice carrying undertones of deep satisfaction. The Vextari leadership is in a state of barely controlled panic. Their soldiers report nightmares about dragon armies. Their administrators see phantom signals in their scanning equipment. Several colonial governors have requested emergency reinforcements to defend against threats that don't officially exist. This had been perhaps Maya's most brilliant insight. The Vextari Empire was held together by fear and the belief in their own invincibility. By making them afraid of shadows, she had turned their greatest strength into a weakness. Every Vexitari now looked over their shoulder, wondering if they would be the next target of the dragon's growing army. Excellent, Maya said. And our recruitment numbers? Over 800 confirmed active agents across 67 worlds, reported Kesitha, a former Vextari engineer who had been sacrificed for questioning orders. Unknown thousands more in passive support roles. The network grows exponentially as word spreads. Maya felt a deep sense of satisfaction. In less than a year, they had gone from a single human girl and one lonely dragon to the largest resistance movement in galactic history. The Vextari had created their own worst nightmare by feeding Thaisara such a diverse array of species and talents. "There's something else," Thaisara added, his ancient voice carrying a note of excitement Maya had never heard before. "My scans have detected familiar energy signatures in 3 different sectors. I believe there may be other dragons still alive in the galaxy." The command center fell silent. Everyone had assumed Thaisara was the last of his kind, the final survivor of whatever ancient cataclysm had scattered the dragons across the cosmos. The possibility that others might still exist changed everything. "If we could contact them," Maya began, her strategic mind already racing ahead to the possibilities. "If we could awaken them," Thaisara corrected. "My kind went into deep hibernation millennia ago to avoid the wars that consumed the galaxy. They sleep in hidden places waiting for a sign that the universe is ready for dragons to fly again." Maya grinned, and her expression was equal parts young girl's excitement and seasoned general's determination. "Then let's give them that sign. It's time to let the Vextari Empire know what humans do when you threaten our pack." She activated the galaxy-wide communication network, sending the signal that would launch the largest coordinated rebellion in recorded history. Across 67 worlds, hundreds of agents received their final orders. In hidden bases and secret facilities, liberation armies began their advance. The age of Vextari dominance was about to end, and it would end because they had made the mistake of throwing a human child to what they thought was a monster. Instead, they had given that monster exactly what it needed to become their worst nightmare: a human perspective on warfare. The first phase of Operation Prometheus exceeded every expectation. Across the Vextari Empire, simultaneous strikes crippled infrastructure that had stood for millennia. Communication relays went dark, supply convoys vanished without trace, and fortress worlds found their orbital defenses mysteriously malfunctioning at precisely the wrong moments. Maya stood in the command center, watching real-time reports stream in from across the galaxy. Her 14th birthday had passed 2 weeks ago, celebrated quietly in the depths of Thaisara's mountain, while her rebellion burned bright among the stars. "Sector 7 reports complete success," announced Vexilin, her blue scales shimmering with excitement. "The Kepler Station fortress has fallen. Commander Toran sends his compliments on the human tactical modifications to our assault craft. Sector 12 confirms the liberation of the Arxian slave colonies," added Zeftos, his telepathic abilities allowing him to coordinate with agents across vast distances instantaneously. "The Vextari garrison surrendered when they realized their reinforcements weren't coming." Maya nodded with satisfaction, but her attention was focused on a different display. 3 star systems had gone completely dark in the past hour, their Vextari administrations apparently abandoning their posts entirely. That level of panic suggested something beyond even their coordinated attacks. "Thaisara," she called to the ancient dragon, who was monitoring psychic communications across multiple dimensions. "Are you sensing what I think you're sensing?" The dragon's massive form materialized more fully in the command center, his star-bright eyes gleaming with an emotion Maya had never seen before. "Joy." "Yes, young general. The sleepers wake. The call of battle has reached them at last." On the main display, energy signatures unlike anything in Vextari databases began appearing across the galaxy. Ancient powers stirred in hidden places, responding to the first coordinated challenge to galactic tyranny in 3,000 years. Dragons were awakening. The first to emerge was Kethmara the Starweaver, whose lair among the crystal moons of Andromeda Prime had been disturbed by fleeing Vextari ships. Her awakening sent shockwaves through subspace that knocked an entire battle fleet out of hyperspace. The second was Vorthak the World Shaper, who rose from the molten core of an industrial planet and began systematically dismantling the mining operations that had scarred his world. "This changes everything," Maya whispered, watching as dragon signatures appeared on sensors across 12 different sectors. The Vextari built their empire on the assumption that the ancient powers were gone forever. "My siblings were never gone," Thaisara corrected gently. "They were simply waiting for someone brave enough to make the first move. You provided that catalyst, young Maya. You showed them that the galaxy could change." The Vextari response was swift and predictable. High Command issued emergency orders recalling all available forces to defend their core worlds. Colonial garrisons were abandoned as ships rushed toward the homeworld sectors. It was exactly what Maya had hoped they would do. Phase 3 is now active, she announced to the Rebellion Network. All liberated worlds are to begin immediate defensive preparations. The Vextari will attempt a counterattack within 72 hours. But Maya was already thinking 3 moves ahead. The Vextari retreat would leave dozens of worlds temporarily defenseless. And those worlds contained millions of enslaved beings who could be recruited to their cause. More importantly, the abandoned facilities contained the advanced manufacturing equipment needed to build a proper liberation fleet. Kesitha, she called to the former Vextari engineer, how quickly can we retool their automated factories to produce ships for our specifications? The multi-armed being consulted her technical displays. With the modifications we've developed, perhaps 36 hours per facility. The Vextari designed their systems for rapid production, but they never imagined anyone would turn that capability against them. Begin immediately, Maya ordered. I want every abandoned facility converted to our purposes before they realize what we're doing. The beauty of fighting the Vextari was that they had spent centuries building the perfect infrastructure for galactic domination. Their factories could produce thousands of ships per week. Their communication networks reached every inhabited system, and their logistical systems were designed to support vast military operations. All Maya had to do was take control of those systems and turn them against their creators. Maya, Thaisara said quietly, there is something you should know. I have been in contact with my awakening siblings, and they wish to meet the human who began this revolution. They are curious about your species. Maya felt a flutter of nervousness. Meeting one ancient dragon had been terrifying enough. The thought of facing multiple creatures of such immense power and intelligence was overwhelming. But she was the leader of this rebellion, and leaders didn't get the luxury of avoiding difficult situations. When and where? She asked simply. Now, Thaisara replied, and here. They are already arriving. The mountain shook as massive forms settled on the peaks around Kepler 442b. Maya could see them through the crystal windows of the command center. Beings of incredible size and majesty, their forms shifting between dimensions as they communicated in frequencies that made reality itself resonate. Bring me to the surface, Maya said, straightening her shoulders. It's time to meet the rest of the family. Minutes later, she stood once again on the platform where her journey had begun, but this time she wasn't alone. Vexlin stood at her right side, Zeftos at her left, and Kesitha behind her with a dozen other rebellion leaders. They were no longer offerings to be sacrificed, but officers in an army that spanned the galaxy. 5 ancient dragons surrounded the platform, their presence making the very air shimmer with power. Thaisara made the introductions in the old tongue, and Maya responded with the formal greetings she had studied during her months of preparation. So, rumbled Kethmara the Starweaver, her voice like solar wind across nebulae, this is the human hatchling who has awakened the galaxy. I am Maya Chen of Earth, Maya replied in flawless Draconic, and I lead the Liberation Alliance in its war against tyranny. Bold words from such a small creature, observed Vorthak the World Shaper, his massive form wreathed in stellar fire. Tell us, little human, why should ancient beings like ourselves involve ourselves in the conflicts of younger species? Maya had expected this question and had prepared for it during her months of planning. Because, Ancient Ones, the Vextari Empire represents everything you once fought against. They enslave entire species, strip worlds bare of resources, and rule through fear and brutality. They are exactly the kind of tyranny that your ancestors went to war to prevent. And what do you offer in return for our aid? Asked Silthera the Dreamwalker, whose form seemed to exist partially in another dimension entirely. Partnership, Maya said simply. Not worship, not servitude, but alliance between equals working toward a common goal. The galaxy is big enough for all of us, but only if we work together to make it free. The dragons exchanged glances that contained entire conversations in languages beyond mortal understanding. Finally, Thaisara spoke for them all. We accept your alliance. Maya Chen of Earth. Let us show the Vextari Empire what happens when they threaten the innocent and awaken powers they cannot comprehend. Maya smiled, feeling the weight of destiny settling on her young shoulders. The girl who had been thrown to a dragon as a sacrifice was now leading an alliance of the galaxy's most ancient and powerful beings. The Vextari had created their own worst nightmare, and it wore the face of a human teenager who refused to accept that might made right. The Battle of the Core Worlds began at exactly 0800 Galactic Standard Time, when Maya's Liberation Fleet dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation around the Vexitari homeworld of Zexithara. The enemy had expected a ragtag collection of stolen ships and desperate rebels. Instead, they faced a coordinated armada of over 10,000 vessels, supported by 5 ancient dragons whose very presence warped space-time around them. Maya stood on the bridge of the flagship Defiance, a massive dreadnought that had once been the pride of the Vextari 7th Fleet. Now it flew under the banner of the Liberation Alliance, its hull modified with human innovations that made it faster, deadlier, and more resilient than its original designers had ever imagined. "All ships report ready," announced Fleet Admiral Vexilin, her Cathari tactical expertise having proven invaluable in organizing their massive force. "Dragon wings are in position. Ground assault team standing by." Maya nodded, studying the tactical display that showed the Vextari defensive formations. Even in their panic, her enemies had managed to assemble an impressive force. Nearly 15,000 ships protected their core systems, supported by orbital weapons platforms that could vaporize small moons. Under normal circumstances, it would have been an impregnable defense, but these were not normal circumstances. "Thaisara, are you ready?" Maya asked through the psychic communication link the ancient dragon had established with her months ago. "More than ready, young general," came the reply, tinged with 3,000 years of suppressed anger. "My siblings and I have debts to settle with the Vextari Empire." Maya activated the fleet-wide communication system, her 14-year-old voice carrying clearly to every ship in her armada. "People of the Liberation Alliance, today we end an empire built on suffering and fear. Today we prove that courage and unity are stronger than tyranny and oppression. Today we go home." The words "go home" carried special meaning for every being in the fleet. Humans, Cathari, Mindari, Arxians, and dozens of other species had all been torn from their families and enslaved by the Vextari. This battle wasn't just about military victory. It was about justice for every child stolen in the night, every family destroyed by alien raiders. "Dragon wings, you are cleared for your approach," Maya ordered, and watched as 5 impossible beings began their descent toward the enemy fleet. The Vextari had fought dragons before, 3 millennia ago, but they had only vague historical records of what such combat actually looked like. No living Vextari had ever seen a dragon in battle. They were about to receive a very educational experience. Kethmara the Starweaver moved first, her massive form blinking in and out of normal space as she manipulated local space-time. Vextari ships found themselves suddenly facing attacks from angles that should have been impossible, their sophisticated targeting systems unable to track an enemy who existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Vorthak, the World Shaper, took a different approach, using his mastery over matter and energy to simply disintegrate enemy vessels at the molecular level. Entire battle groups vanished as their atomic structure was redistributed across several star systems. But it was Thaisara who provided the most devastating assault. 3,000 years of rage at being forced to accept innocent offerings exploded outward in a wave of psychic energy that overloaded every Vextari mind within 100,000 kilometers. Ships drifted powerless as their crews fell unconscious, their military discipline shattered by the overwhelming force of an ancient dragon's fury. "All fleet units, begin your advance," Maya ordered, watching as her carefully coordinated battle plan unfolded with mechanical precision. "Remember, we're here to liberate, not to conquer. Any Vextari who surrender are to be treated according to Alliance protocols." This last point was crucial to Maya's long-term strategy. The Liberation Alliance couldn't rule the galaxy through fear as the Vextari had done. They needed to prove that their way was better, that freedom and justice were preferable to tyranny and oppression. The battle was over in less than 6 hours. The Vextari fleet, demoralized by the dragon assault and facing enemies who fought with desperate courage, crumbled faster than anyone had dared hope. By midday, Alliance forces were accepting surrenders across all 3 core worlds. Maya stood in the former Emperor's palace on Zexithara, looking out at a city where millions of beings were experiencing freedom for the first time in their lives. Slave collars had been broken, prison camps opened, and families reunited with loved ones they had thought lost forever. "The preliminary reports are encouraging," Vexilin said, joining Maya on the palace balcony. 17 star systems have declared independence from Vextari rule in the past 12 hours. Another 37 are requesting alliance protection while they establish new governments. Maya nodded, but her expression remained thoughtful. Victory was the easy part. Building something better is going to be much harder. She was right to be concerned. The Vextari Empire had controlled over 200 star systems and billions of beings. Simply defeating their military was only the beginning. The Alliance now faced the monumental task of helping dozens of species rebuild their civilizations, while preventing the power vacuum from creating new tyrannies. I've been thinking, Maya said slowly, about what comes next. We can't rule this galaxy the way the Vextari did. We're not conquerors, we're liberators. What do you propose? Vexlin asked, recognizing the tone Maya used when she was developing a new strategy. A confederation, Maya replied. Each species governs itself, but we maintain alliance forces to prevent any one group from threatening the others. The dragons serve as mediators for disputes that can't be resolved through normal diplomacy. It was an ambitious vision, a galaxy where different species could coexist peacefully, where conflicts were resolved through negotiation rather than force, where children could grow up without fear of alien raiders in the night. And what about Earth? Vexlin asked gently. The Vexitari raids on your homeworld stopped months ago when they recalled their forces, but your people still don't know about any of this. Maya's expression softened at the mention of her home. She had been fighting for over a year now, but she still thought about her parents every day. They probably believed she was dead, another missing child whose fate would never be known. First contact, she said simply. It's time for Earth to meet its galactic neighbors, and I think I know just how to arrange it. 3 days later, a small fleet of Alliance ships dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the solar system. Maya had chosen the diplomatic vessels carefully. Sleek, beautiful craft that looked more like works of art than weapons of war. She wanted humanity's first glimpse of galactic civilization to inspire wonder, not fear. The lead ship was crewed entirely by humans who had been rescued from Vextari slave ships over the past year. Maya wanted the first voices Earth heard to be familiar ones, people who could explain what had happened and what it meant for the future. As they approached Earth, Maya stood on the bridge and looked out at the blue-white marble that had been her home for the first 13 years of her life. Soon, very soon, she would see her parents again, but first she had a species to welcome into the galactic community. Open a channel to all human communication networks, she ordered. It's time to tell Earth that their lost children are coming home. The reunion took place in the same Colorado campground where Maya's journey had begun 18 months earlier. Her parents had aged visibly during her absence, gray streaking their hair and new lines etched around their eyes. When they saw her stepping out of the gleaming diplomatic shuttle, they ran toward her with tears streaming down their faces. "Maya," her mother cried, catching her in a fierce embrace that lifted the 14-year-old off her feet. "We never stopped looking for you. We never gave up hope." "I know, Mom," Maya whispered, holding her parents close and feeling truly young for the first time in over a year. "I'm sorry it took so long to come home." Her father pulled back to look at her, his eyes taking in the changes that a year of leading a galactic rebellion had wrought. Maya stood taller now, carried herself with the confidence of someone accustomed to command, and her eyes held depths that spoke of experiences far beyond her years. "What happened to you?" he asked softly. "The news said you were taken by aliens, that you helped lead some kind of war." Maya smiled, the expression equal parts her old mischievous grin and something entirely new. "It's a long story, Dad. But the short version is that some very bad people made the mistake of thinking humans would be easy prey." Behind her, Thisa'ara materialized in his smaller, more manageable form. Even reduced to the size of a large horse, the ancient dragon's presence was unmistakable. Maya's parents stepped protectively in front of their daughter before realizing that the creature was radiating calm, rather than threat. "Mom, Dad," Maya said formally, "I'd like you to meet my friend Tessera. He's the one who kept me safe when I was captured." The dragon inclined his great head respectfully. "Maya's parents," he said in accented but perfect English. "Your daughter is remarkable. In all my millennia of existence, I have never encountered a being with such courage and wisdom." Maya's father, still struggling to process the fact that his daughter was apparently on first-name terms with a mythical creature, managed to find his voice. Thank you for protecting her. It is I who should thank you, Thisara replied solemnly. You raised a child who chose to fight for others rather than accept injustice. Because of Maya, millions of beings across the galaxy are free today who would otherwise have lived and died in slavery. Over the next several hours, Maya told her parents the full story of her capture, her alliance with the dragon, and the rebellion that had toppled the Vextari Empire. She showed them holographic displays of the liberated worlds, introduced them to Vexilin and the other alliance leaders via quantum communication, and explained the new galactic confederation that was even now taking shape among the stars. But what does this mean for Earth? Her mother asked when the tale was finished. Are we part of this alliance now? Only if humanity chooses to be, Maya replied. That's why I came back. Earth gets to decide its own future. We can join the galactic community as full partners, or we can remain isolated until we feel ready for contact. Either choice will be respected. What she didn't mention was that Earth's choice had essentially been made for them. The revelation that aliens existed, that they had been kidnapping humans for decades, and that a human child had led the rebellion that freed the galaxy, had fundamentally changed how humanity saw itself. Within weeks of first contact, every major government on Earth had voted to join the Liberation Alliance. The transition wasn't without challenges. Human technology was centuries behind galactic standards. Earth's political systems were chaotic compared to the streamlined governments of other alliance worlds, and there were significant cultural barriers to overcome. But humans brought something to the galactic community that had been missing for millennia. A fresh perspective unclouded by ancient grudges and traditional thinking. Maya found herself serving as Earth's unofficial ambassador to the galaxy, splitting her time between her homeworld and the Alliance capital that had been established on the former Vextari homeworld. It wasn't the life she had imagined for herself as a 13-year-old camping with her parents, but she couldn't imagine wanting any other path. 5 years after the Battle of the Core Worlds, Maya stood once again on Thisara's mountain, now transformed into the headquarters of the Alliance Defense Force. She was 19 now, officially recognized as the youngest fleet admiral in galactic history, but she still came here when she needed to think. Regrets? Thisara asked, materializing beside her as he had so many times over the years. None, Maya replied without hesitation. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if the Vextari had never taken me, if I had grown up normal on Earth. But then I think about all the people who are free now because they made the mistake of throwing me to a dragon. The ancient being chuckled, the sound-carrying affection earned through years of partnership. You were never destined for a normal life, young Maya. Leaders are forged in fire, and you have been tested in flames that would have destroyed lesser beings. Maya looked out at the stars that were no longer distant points of light, but destinations she had visited, worlds she had helped liberate, homes to friends and allies across the galaxy. The scared 13-year-old who had faced a dragon in this very spot was gone, replaced by someone stronger and wiser, but still fundamentally human. Any word from the exploration fleets? She asked, referring to the Alliance expeditions that were pushing beyond the borders of known space. Interesting developments, Thisara confirmed. They've detected signs of other galactic civilizations beyond our local cluster, ancient powers that may be even older than my kind. It seems the universe is larger and more complex than any of us imagined. Maya grinned, the expression holding echoes of the mischievous child she had once been. Good. I was starting to worry that things might get boring now that we've established peace in our little corner of the galaxy. Peace is never boring when you're helping to build it, Thisara observed. And I suspect, Maya Chen of Earth, that your greatest adventures still lie ahead. As if summoned by his words, a communication crystal began glowing on Maya's wrist. The message was from the Deep Space Exploration Fleet, and it carried news that would once again change everything. They had made contact with representatives of the Andromedean Collective, a vast civilization from the nearest galaxy that had been watching the Liberation Alliance with growing interest. Maya read the message twice, then looked up at Thisara with the same determined expression she had worn when first proposing they build an army together. Well, she said, activating the quantum communicator that would reach Alliance command across half the galaxy. It looks like it's time to introduce ourselves to the neighbors. All fleet commanders, this is Admiral Chen. We have a new mission. The girl who had been thrown to a dragon had become the woman who would lead her species to the stars. The Vextari had intended her as a sacrifice to maintain their empire. Instead, they had given the galaxy exactly what it needed: a human's perspective on what freedom was worth, and what price she was willing to pay to protect it. As Maya began issuing orders for humanity's first intergalactic diplomatic mission, Disara smiled with the deep satisfaction of an ancient being who had finally found his true purpose. He had spent 3,000 years pretending to be a monster to protect his world. Now, thanks to one remarkable human child, he could spend the rest of eternity helping to build something better. The dragon's gift had been hope. Maya's gift to the galaxy had been the proof that hope was worth fighting for.